Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, I'm John, this is Many a True Nerd, and welcome to the grand finale of the Many a True Nerd Top 50 Games of all time, and here we flipping go. The final 12, my favourite games of all time. I've seen a lot of people speculating down in the comments, so okay, let's dive straight on in, because we have got some big games to cover this evening. Kicking off with number 12, Resident Evil 4 from 2005, not the more recent one, the older one, and Resident Evil 4, a game so damn good that you can literally see its impact on gaming for decades after it released. Like, that exact third-person camera over-the-shoulder action-adventure shooter format. Resident Evil 4 got that so absolutely right that it changed the gaming industry. Like, the creators of Dead Space completely open that what they were trying to do was make Resident Evil 4, but in space. And honestly, that's fair. It's a spectacular game. So, okay, let's start with the combat, which I think does not get enough credit when we're talking about Resident Evil 4. You see, Leon isn't actually that fast on the ground, and he can only shoot when he's standing still, which makes the combat of Resident Evil 4 surprisingly tactical, because you've got to pick the right moments to run and the right moments to fight. So it never descends into a game about blasting. So picking off the odd isolated enemy with, say, a shot to the head, a quick kick, and a few follow-up knife attacks, that's the cocky ticket. And that was the genius of the game's incredibly famous opening, the Town Siege. It was maybe the most elegant tutorial of all time, because without ever explicitly saying it to you, Resident Evil 4 taught you everything you needed to know about how to play the game. No, you cannot win in a straight slugging match. No, if you try and hold one position, you will eventually get overwhelmed. Run, skirmish, use the right tools for the job, and it all becomes a lot more doable. Sorry, I got distracted by the opening there, but it's a brilliant game overall, happily embracing the cheesiness of classic Resident Evil, while also tossing in the odd, genuinely unnerving section too. It's just a series of brilliantly designed puzzles and arenas that barely puts a foot wrong during its entire campaign. Number 11, Civilization 6 from 2016, and okay, I'll admit, I'm probably an easy mark for Civilization. I love building things and making cities, all that good stuff. But somehow, Civilization 6 and the exact way it works really syncs up perfectly with precisely what I'm looking for in a game like this. Say, thanks to the system of districts and neighbourhoods, you get to watch the map slowly transform from lush countryside to a sprawling megacity by the end of the game. And I love how the game has absolutely no issue with playing a completely pacifist game, because so many huge strategy games seem to see war as the ultimate goal of everything. In the end, every bit of infrastructure, every resource, it's just a tool to support a bigger war machine. And even my most beloved Paradox games often do this, Stellaris especially. But this game treats war as a tool that you can use or not, and I love that. And the presentation helps too. Like, I may be in the minority here, but I love the bright colours and slightly exaggerated cartoony style of Civilization 6 over the more muted and realistic maps of Civilization 5. And the soundtrack is just genuinely wonderful, with so many brilliant tracks that evolve as the game proceeds. This here is a game that I love so much, I can happily just re-roll starts for hours. A game so damn good, I can have fun when I'm not even actually playing it. Now that is something special. Number 10, Elden Ring from 2022, and this is special to me, because this here is the first Souls-like that I really got. Like, sure, I had a nice enough time with Dark Souls 1 and 3 in particular, but Elden Ring is the first one that grabbed me and made me fully understand. So much so that even though the game's not even been out 2 years and hasn't even got its expansion yet, it's already in my top 6 most played Steam games of all time, and will almost certainly keep rising. And in the end, I think it's the structure that made it work for me. Other Souls games, eventually, I always hit a brick wall where I'm not allowed to proceed or access anything new before I beat a particular enemy, which is where the frustration creeps in for me. But then there was Elden Ring, and it turns out that open world Souls is immediately one of my favourite things ever. it still gives you that satisfaction of facing and defeating a ludicrously huge and dangerous bosses, but also happily lets you walk away, try something else, and come back later if you're just not having fun. And I love that that philosophy informs the entire game. If you're not ready to beat Margit, don't worry, you can just walk around Stormvale and come back later. You can just stroll into maybe half the entire world at the start of the game if you want to. It's hugely open, and there's so much to do. But despite how gigantic the game is, I think I've already taken 5 or 6 characters to the late game over the course of several hundred hours. The combat feels great too, and more specifically, every character build's exact type of combat feels great in its own distinct way. So replaying the game is a joy, it is a wonderful, amazing game. A revelation to my mind. Number 9, Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 from 2002, and this here is a game that I could basically play forever. Another strong candidate for the Trapped on a Desert Island with 1 Game for a Year award, because in 2 odd decades of playing this, I have not yet got bored of building a ridiculously long go-kart track that goes on a tour around the park, or a transport ride that goes around the very edge. Not for any logistical reason, just because that's what this game does. It just reaches into my brain and convinces me to spend hours making something that has no mechanical value, just because, you know, it feels right, it looks nice, and I want to build a damn nice park. I did 20 years ago, I still do today. This is the very definition of a timeless game. Number 8, Fallout 3 from 2008, and here we go, it's another Fallout, and this here was my first Fallout game. I bought it secondhand from a game store bargain bin, pretty much at random. I just happened to see the box and thought, sure, that was my first interaction with the Fallout franchise, and me picking that game is probably a big part of why Many a True Nerd exists, and it's really bloody weird to think about how that one decision in a game store was maybe one of the most significant I made in my entire life. But anyway, the game. And right, obviously I could talk all day about Fallout 3. In fact, I already have in Fallout 3 is better than you think. But let's focus on, you know, the big important stuff. The pieces that made me fall in love with this game. And I think Fallout 3 may have been one of the first games I ever played that made me realise, oh, I can literally just go anywhere. Like, there isn't a convenient NPC who tells me to turn back because that bit of the world is for later. You can just pick a direction and just start walking. Sure, you'll probably die, no one said it was a smart idea, but you can, and if you get lucky, you can even stumble into the vault where your dad is. It's right there. Like, I myself accidentally found the Project Purity lab early in my first playthrough, so yeah. It was the wasteland and how wide open it is that made me fall in love with Fallout 3, and I do think it is a really special part of the game, the lonely atmosphere in particular. No other Fallout game really captures the sense of walking through a desolate, blasted, empty space. Like, say, in New Vegas and Fallout 4, the wasteland is a fun, exciting adventure, and in Fallout 1 and 2, travel is mostly done via a menu, but in Fallout 3, you get that desolate, dead world, the washed out green colour, the haunting soundtrack, the random encounters and roaming enemies designed to make the world feel chaotic and dangerous. I love Fallout 3 for all kinds of reasons, but it's the wasteland that's going to stick in my memory forever. Number 7, FTL Faster Than Light from 2012, and okay, this one is pretty simple actually. FTL Faster Than Light is perfect. And I know that sounds like an odd thing to say, but here's the thing. Every other game on this list, I could point out the weaker bits of the game. Fallout 3 has some underwhelming DLC and a pretty uninspiring final boss. Arkham Asylum has a few too many Titan enemy fights, to be honest, but I don't think this game has anything wrong with it. I can't think of anything that I would change. It is just incredibly tightly designed. It's perfect. Every single weapon type and system works well and opens up a new way of playing the game. And there's really not much more to say about it. The only thing stopping this game from being higher on the list is it's so tightly focused on being the perfect tactical spaceship combat game that there are other games that beat it purely for being much bigger in scale. But I would still say this is probably the single most perfectly formed game I have ever played. Number 6, Skyrim from 2011, and here's the thing. Skyrim is one of my biggest comfort games. Like, I cannot tell you how many times I have started a playthrough, run through Helgen, gone to Riverwood, gone on to Whiterun, spoken to everyone there to gather all the missions. There's just something about the early game of Skyrim that I find deeply, intensely relaxing. Maybe it's the wonderful score, or maybe sometimes a game is just going to connect with you in a way that's difficult to explain. And I think that's true for me and Skyrim, but what I will say is, I've had a particular love for Bethesda games in part because of the world, like the actual physical space. And I think Skyrim is the best map that Bethesda has ever designed. The huge towering mountains are brilliant as they break the sightlines between towns, which wonderfully helps with the illusion of scale, and the diverse climates are brilliant. The snow at the top of the map, the forests to the south and the swamps to the west. The genius of Skyrim is you could dump me anywhere in that game and within seconds I would know roughly what bit of the map I was in. It's just a really nice world to be in, and I'm always going to come back to it just to visit every now and then because the world is just so wonderful. Number 5, Pokemon, the second generation, from somewhere between 1999 and 2001, depending on version and territory, and yes, an entire generation. No, that's not cheating, because you can't reasonably argue that red is objectively better than blue, or vice versa. So when it comes to Pokemon, it's legit to give this place to an entire generation. And yes, I know this footage isn't of the second generation, because you can't actually currently buy the second generation. But okay, why Gold, Silver and Crystal? Firstly, I hold that, relative to the hardware they were running on, the second generation of Pokemon is the most technically impressive game ever created. Despite being able to run on the original Game Boy, they implemented an in-game clock that puts most current-day games to shame. Once said, the game keeps track of real-world time, and that was implemented into the game through both graphics updating for day or night and changing which Pokemon appeared at certain times. And the games even had flipping online functions, in Japan at least, through the Game Boy mobile adapter, which is how Celebi was accessed. And the game introduced the breeding and egg mechanics that have gone largely untouched for 2 decades. The second generation is bonkers. But even then, there's one other thing that stands out to me more than anything else. And that's the post-game content, because after you finish Gold and Silver, get 8 badges, save the world, defeat the Elite Four, you know, the point you think you were about done, the game suddenly announces, by the way, here's the original game with 8 more gyms, and once you're done with that, get to the top of that mountain and fight Ash, Colkey, Ketchum. An absolutely stunningly incredible game. Number 4, Skies of Arcadia from 2000. Though generally when we're talking about Skies of Arcadia, we do mean the 2002 GameCube re-release, which was very similar but ever so slightly different. And this one is really special to me because sure, I played a lot of video games before I played Skies of Arcadia, but Skies of Arcadia, I think, was one of the first games I ever played that made me rethink what video games meant to me. Like, up to that point, I think I mostly put them in the same part of my brain as toys, for example. They were things to play with, a fun thing to share with friends. And then I played Skies of Arcadia, and I think that changed all of that, and made me look at games as a medium that potentially could also be a work of art. Because Skies of Arcadia is a game that tells a wonderful story. A very comforting and familiar story at times. Like, it literally opens with a mysterious princess fleeing an evil empire, and at its core, I'd say, is the love of exploration. It's a really optimistic game about the joy of seeing the world, and it's incredibly earnest about it. Skies of Arcadia is a game that always makes me smile, and I think that's exactly what it was designed to do. The graphics are colourful and stylised, and as a result, they've aged extraordinarily well, and the soundtrack is maybe my favourite in all of gaming history. And it wasn't just the story either. Back when I first played it, I'd never seen a game with this sense of scale before. And that wasn't just, you know, a narrative trick or an illusion. By the end of the game, you can basically explore literally the entire world. This is a game I've always held really close to my heart. So much so that maybe a decade or so back, I actually sat down to record a series of Skies of Arcadia for the channel. And I decided when I looked at it, I hadn't done the game justice, so I deleted that footage. And I said to myself I was going to come back to it later when I was ready. And I think that time has finally fucking come, because starting next week, Skies of Arcadia is gonna be our new series, and blimey has it been a long time coming. Number 3, Rome Total War from 2004, and okay, you may remember me saying last time that Fallout 4 is my most played game on Steam of all time. And that's true, but I am extremely confident that because I played this off a disc for many years, this is in fact my most played game of all time, and this may be the greatest example yet of my continued insistence that in big franchises, it's often the earliest entries that get it right, because this here was the first 3D Total War game, and there have been, okay, many, let's just say many 3D Total War games since. But this one does so much right. Okay, let's start with the big one, the battle maps, because these days it's all about carefully curated, balanced, handcrafted maps, and that sounds good, doesn't it? Until you see the same map again, and again, and again, and again, but not back in Rome, oh no! Every single battle map is unique, because they're literally generated out of where you are, where the enemy are, and what else is nearby. Fleets, cities, world wonders, they can all appear around the battle map. And if you wanted, say, forest to hide in, well, you're gonna need to put your army near some forest on the campaign map. Want the high ground? Position your army near hills, damn it. This makes sense. Why was this ever taken out? Or alternatively, how about population mechanics? You know, where your cities literally had a certain number of people in them, and training troops drained that number. So raising too many troops slowed down economic development and hurt your tax income. Like, you know, makes sense. But no, that's gone too. Or morale, say. How in Rome, the focus is overwhelmingly on finding a weak point in the enemy's line and then pushing them there to trigger a rout, so you could wrap up the entire line, which is how many ancient fights were decided. And it made fights tense and tactical. But no, that's gone these days. Modern Total War is full of blob fights, because they changed morale to remove the possibility of mass chain routes, despite the fact they were fun and satisfying, and damn it, everything was better in Rome Total War. They completely 100% nailed it in 2004. Number 2, Mass Effect from 2007, and okay, here we go, one last time, everybody sing along. Mass Effect is the best game in the franchise because they got it right first time. And I know what you're all going to say, John, Mass Effect 2 is the best one. Everybody knows that, and yes, Mass Effect 2 is a really good game, but I would put this to you. Mass Effect 2 is only as good as it is because Mass Effect 1 did the heavy lifting first. You see, it was Mass Effect 1 that introduced us to the whole galaxy, to spectres and intergalactic politics and reapers and sexy blue aliens. The first game in the franchise has to introduce literally everything, including the cast of companions, and I think it's only because Mass Effect 1 is so monumentally successful at making us fall in love with Rex and Garrus and Talia and Liara and the entire Mass Effect universe that the rest of the franchise works as well as it does. They had to get us fully invested in a brand new sci-fi universe where we knew nothing going into it. And I think Mass Effect 1 is hugely successful at that. And that's in part because of the game's structure, where the main story missions are fairly long and take place in a small number of worlds, meaning you get to spend an extended period of time on Noveria, say. By comparison, in Mass Effect 2 and 3, we've now got so much ground to cover and so many characters to recruit or help that we barely touch down for 20 minutes before we're done with that planet and never go back there again. I just found the larger or more open story areas of Mass Effect 1 to be way more interesting, and I prefer the combat too. Unlike the later games that are shooters with RPG elements, the original to me feels like a really good balance of RPG and shooter, with a way more slow and tactical flow to its combat. And most of all, more than anything, the single most important thing in Mass Effect 1 is the Mako. The Mako was great, and you could boo as much as you want, but it doesn't change the fact it was a really crucial bit of the game, okay? Just being able to, you know, nip down onto a bit of a planet, poke around, maybe find a small mission, maybe just get some easy money from prospecting. It really helped to make the universe feel big. It was an important part of the illusion, damn it, and just overall, for me, every bit of Mass Effect 1 works beautifully, both in the narrative and the gameplay. So much so, in fact, that only one game could possibly beat it. And that is number 1, Fallout New Vegas from 2010. And You know the funny old thing? This wasn't even close. Like, I love Mass Effect 1, and I've played so much Rome Total War, it's probably concerning. And Skies of Arcadia really cooking matters to me. But there is no chance in hell that any of them would get into the #1 spot. That's for 2 reasons. Number 1, as you'll probably have noticed by now, some of the games are on this list for very personal reasons. Well, back in 2013, when I had, this tiny YouTube channel that I was just doing for, a bit of fun that nobody was watching, I decided to play some New Vegas. And it kind of exploded pretty much straight away. And within a few years, I'd quit my job to do this full time. New Vegas literally changed the direction of my life. And I can never repay it for that. And that's fine. That could have delivered New Vegas to the winning spot by itself, but here's the thing. Even if I was somehow able to divorce New Vegas from the impact it's had on me personally, I still think it's the best game overall I've ever played. Sure, maybe there are other games elsewhere on this list that do the odd thing better, but the ludicrous amount that New Vegas does all in one package is kind of ridiculous. So ridiculous, in fact, you can't reasonably expect me to cover it all here. Like, where would I even cooking start? The incredible amount of world building, maybe? Or how about one of the most interesting reputation systems in all of gaming, where the game independently tracks both your positive and negative deeds towards a faction, so you can never get to the ultimate idolized state if you previously did some harm to that group. Your old misdeeds are always still remembered, which makes cooking sense, and almost no other game has ever done this. It's a brilliant RPG, with every skill integrated seamlessly into missions and conversations everywhere you cooking look. It's funny, it's intelligent, it can go to some incredibly dark places, and it's just the best game ever bloody made. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen, that there is my top 50 games of all time, and I do hope in general you've enjoyed this tiny mini-series we put together for this week, because as some of you may know, I just needed a tiny bit of extra time to work on our next full series, Skies of Arcadia, starting next Tuesday. So, yes indeed, we'll be back to normal next week. Hopefully, you join me for that. But in the meantime, I've been John, this has been Many a True Nerd, and this has been my top games of all time. Thank you very much, and goodbye. If we just hide the bodies, nobody needs to know about this. Yes! My stupid plan has worked! It turns out I'm a genius! The giant rat scorpion is not gone! Oh, hang on, there's more yet though, I'm still being very shocked. Guys, where's the NCR? Nobody needs to know.